Hello everybody again, and here's already part number 2 to my 4 videos about sewing a waterfall dress and bolero, and to do the patterns as well for the waterfall and for the bolero. Well, I hope you were able to really follow my instructions on how to do the waterfall for a dress or for a shirt, as I showed you in my first video. And again, I like to say, if you really take your time following everything step by step, you definitely will be able to do it the way I showed you, even if you haven't done so much sewing or pattern working for yourself at all. Do this shirt or this dress in any lengths you wish, because the only thing is actually about the waterfall and the shoulder, how to do it. And if you're quite good already with sewing, you definitely do not need to watch this whole video, but I do suggest, if you haven't seen the way I've done the shoulder, then at least watch that shoulder part, which is more or less the first thing anyway, and the rest, doing the sides and finishing the dress off with the seam, is so easy. I know you don't need my help for that. So you see here, I do not have this dress with a long sleeve on. It's the bolero on the top, which I can take off at any time. As I mentioned before, if I'm getting too cold or too warm, I can always change it. And if you have a pattern, make sure that you do the cutting, that you're lying it nicely on the side together, so you have a matching pattern on your dress and don't have it funny looking on the side. That wouldn't be nice. So let me show you how we're going to sew this dress. So here you not only see my finished pattern, you also see that I did cut my material already. Both parts, the front and the back, have been folded over in the middle edges, as you can see, and I measured out which lengths I would like to have the dress, and I added that on the lengths on as well. Why it is so easy to sew this dress, even for starters, is because, as you can see, actually this dress is only made out of 2 single parts, front and back, besides some facing that you will need for the back part in the neck and for the armholes. On my front part, you can see now that I did add already the facing directly onto this. When I fold it over, you see it's like a mirrored part. So let's take the case you have a pattern for a waterfall, but it's not been cut on, but your top edge is straight. Then all you have to do is take a piece of paper and put it exactly on that little shoulder part that you got there, and make it so it fits exactly over when you fold it over. And you can also cut this in one go, because that makes it really fall nicely. And how deep you do the facing, that is again your decision. And now you have to think, what do you want to do with the armhole? How do you want to finish that off? And the neck, the middle part on the neck. So I have planned, as I have a very, very stretchable material, a jersey here, which is nice to do. I'm only going to clean off with the overlock the edge of my armhole, and I'm just going to stitch it over the way you see me folding it over now. And that will be just perfect for my armhole. But if you have a material that's not very stretchable, then you have to make an extra facing for it. And that is exactly what I'm doing with my middle back on the neck. As you can see, this is my back exactly. So I will have to cut a little piece to do my facing. This was the leftover from here actually. I haven't done anything to this yet, besides that it was the leftover. And again, here I would like to point out to you, as I had my side seam exactly next to each other, that's why my pattern of the material fits nicely on the side together. but as the front is much higher, that's why I had that little leftover piece there anyway from the height. So what do I do with this part, with this little leftover part? To do the facing, of course, it needs quite a huge right angle piece of material, which was my leftover here, as you know. And before I cut this into the shape that I need, I've been already to my ironing board with this piece, and I ironed on an extra facing, a sticking facing, to make this slightly thicker. I don't know if you can see this here because it's the same color. You can slightly see that there's a facing on, which I ironed on, because this will keep my neck nicely firm in position, and that is so much better. And as this is a stretch material and the facing that I ironed on is very, very soft as well, it's better to prepare this like that first before you cut the shape out, and now after you ironed on your facing, now you can cut this piece out. So I need a little weight on here, and again I have it folded over in the middle of the back, and I cut my little shoulder part out and once around the neck, exactly the same shape as I cut the dress part out. And now I decide how low down I want my facing to be. And I want it approximately now to cut it on 4.5. Then the centimeter seam will disappear, and I have about 3.5 centimeter inside my back on my dress here. So always do this first. Prepare a little square, stick your interfacing on, and then cut it out into shape, and you will see it always fits very, very well. Because if you do this before you iron and it's all cut correctly, and then you start ironing it, then you sometimes lose the shape of this little part. The same you should do. Let's say you have to do a color for a shirt. You should do the same. You should first have it very roughly cut, stick your material on that you want to make it a little bit harder and firm, and then cut it out, and it will be perfect for you. Maybe you remember now that you once did a cutting first and then the ironing, and you wondered why it didn't fit so well. So, with other words, that is just a little tip of mine for you how you should do this. And of course, I mentioned I'm just only going to turn my armhole parts over and stitch them down. But if you want to do it real professional, and if your material is not so stretchable as this jersey, then you can do exactly the same by cutting a facing exactly in the shape as I did it with the neck part right now, and then this will be perfect. So what do we have to do next? So I will go to my overlock now with all my materials here, with all my cuts, and I will finish off nicely just the edge of the front on the top there. I will do the same with this facing. I will clean that off there, and also the armhole I will already do with the safety, and then I see you on my sewing machine right now. So here you see my nicely finished off edge with the overlock from my neck facing. I've also done the armhole parts already. That's cleaned off. So it's all prepared, because these are the first jobs you got to do. And on the front, I ironed my facing part that I added on directly. I ironed that over, and as well I cleaned off with the overlock the edge from the top, so it's all ready to do the shoulder then. So I will start with sewing on my facing part on the neck part. As you could see from the cutting, it was exactly the correct shape with each other. That means all you have to do is lie it edge on edge, and as I added 1 centimeter, I do a 1 centimeter seam right here. You can, on your cutting, maybe make you a little mark exactly in the middle of the back. I'm quite used to doing something like that without any marks. That's why you don't see any at the moment. So all the way along you do this 1 centimeter seam, or whichever width you allowed for your seam. And now, unfortunately, sorry, the camera is not quite there in the corner, but you can see it on this side now. As there's a little bit of a round, I put a couple of cuts in. Now you have the possibility of stitching it all the way through over, or just ironing it. But my favorite way to do something like that is that I will stitch it over on the facing that I just stitched on, and the seam underneath is lying towards the facing. With other words, I'm stitching the facing including with the seam flat down, because that allows me to have a really professional, or this gives me a really professional finishing on this part. And if you only, without even being on the ironing board, just lie it down once, you see, because of that stitching down, it wants to lie totally flat there already. And if you just steam this over now once with your ironing, with your iron, it is a perfect finish. And it never rolls out on the top. You can see that. It wants to lie towards the left side, because you're not supposed to see the seam. That is not the idea. A professional finish would be like this, without the left side coming out and showing out. This is also a good idea if once you have a material which doesn't fit perfectly. You'll never see it anyway. To make your next job much easier, you will just now take those little facing bits which are from the shoulder, the part, and only with a small stitch, like 3-4 millimeters, stitch it flat down. So it's like one piece shoulder now, and it makes it so much easier for you to do the next shoulder part that we have to sew now. Look at this again, how nicely and finished it lies there now. Really professional. That's how you would like it. I've just been on my ironing board anyway and just steamed over it once, and you see how nicely this looks there. So now we are ready come to our front part. Here is the edge that I ironed over, as I mentioned before, which you should do as well, because it's nice and flat. It's easy to do then. Put your front part on the sewing machine with the right side facing you up, and take the back and put the right side of the material facing down. And now you first of all only sew that little bit of your shoulder there into that corner, and you can see your ironed edge, and you can see the edge from your finished back there, and that should lie just a little bit over, because you will have to flap this over like that later. So practically your last stitch now, while stitching it, will hit exactly the end of your back part and hit the ironed over edge that you have from the front. Right there. That's where they meet. Even if it looks maybe to you as if it's standing over, but it doesn't, because you cannot lie it on just straight. It's got to fit, like I said, in that corner. So fasten your stitch in the beginning and at the end very well, and stitch exactly into that corner to make sure that last stitch is really also very well held. I folded this back for you so maybe you can see this better. Here we go. Now I could just fold this over, but then I probably get some crease into there if I would do it like that. Maybe if the material is very, very stretchy, it might work. But the correct way to do it is now to cut onto this last stitch. See, you can see my ironing line there, and you see my last stitch, and you do a cut directly onto that last stitch. And when you now fold it over, it lies perfectly there. And all you have to do is stitch along completely in your seam that you have already, or a touch over towards the left side, also towards your big part, then the first seam doesn't show out. And when I turn this around now, you have a super perfect finished shoulder. But I just as well show you on the other shoulder first. Of course, as well, you can first of all check exactly what you've done. Lie it once on the machine, have a look. Is this a nice following there? Is it the way you want it? Check again on this side that you have no extra pleats put in, something you don't want. So we come to the other shoulder. Again, you put your front down. You see this little shoulder part there. And you take your back, put it on top. And again, you slightly lie it over that ironed edge. So where you start sewing will be exactly meeting with the ironed edge. I hope you understand how I'm explaining this as I'm following my own German sewing and talking part here. I'm sure there are some words I don't know exactly how to say, but I hope you can follow it anyway. So, and again here, I will have to do a little cut exactly to my last or first stitch. In that case, I started there, so it was my first stitch. And now, again, I fold it over. And it doesn't matter if you start on from that side or from this side. That doesn't matter. Of course, if you stitch on top of the seam that you have already, you know you're exactly straight and correctly, and this seam will not show out then. So that is already how the shoulders can be done. The rest now is actually nothing whatsoever. Look at this, practically your whole top. Here's your waterfall. There's your shoulders lovely cleaned off. There's nothing that has to be done with the overlock anymore. It's all tidy, clean, and very professionally done, believe me. Check it all over again before we continue. While checking my jobs, if I've done it correctly, I always right away cut all off little seams that might be hanging around. And now you can see, same as earlier on the back shoulder, this facing now is also hanging around. So the same as on the back part, I just stitch that particular part down, so for the next job I do not have to fiddle with it. It's as is one piece then with the front, all tidy, finished off. Because now I would like to do my armholes. And as I said to you before, I'm not going to put a facing extra onto this, as my material is so nice, stretchy. I could iron my armhole over first and then stitch it, but as I'm used to doing these jobs just by myself like that, I'm just going to start on any of my armholes and stitch it over and finish it off. So all I have to do is turn my dress, almost finished dress, around so the left side is facing me, and turn over 1 centimeter, as that is what I added for the seam, and I finished it off. So I'm just gonna start on whichever armhole, it doesn't matter, fold it over by 1 centimeter, bit by bit. You cannot stretch this into a straight. You have to keep on following the form the way it's cut. And here you can see this helps me now that I stitched this little facing over already. There are some threads which I haven't cut off yet. I cleaned that off as well. So my actual width of my seam that I'm stitching over there is approximately 7 millimeters, and that also holds my overlock stitch down very well, because it happens often you have a ring on and you slip into a dress and you know your ring gets stuck with the overlock thread. So that's why I like to stitch directly through this. It holds it down, and there is not a big possibility that I will get stuck on one of my threads there. So that's very good. You see, I'm almost finished with doing both of my armholes, and they're finished off, I will go to my ironing board, steam them down once both before I get to do the side seam. Of course, I check it again first to make sure I don't have any pleaches stitched in, but as you can see, without being ironed so far, this looks already exactly as I wish. So, after I steamed it down, now I have to do my side seam, and that is just a straight seam. I'm not going to show this to you, as any of you can do this. You can see how my pattern is fitting there, how I cut it, and I just go on my overlock machine, on my safety, and whatever machine you have, you will have to do this with, and do a straight 1 centimeter seam all the way down from my armhole down to the bottom seam. And I'll be back to you when that's done. All right, here I am back from my safety machine. As you can see, I've done both of my sides totally down, straight line. Anybody can do that. But there's something I don't like here, and that is this top edge. You can see the seam, you can see my safety threads, which are on purpose left hanging on, because if I compare it now with my shoulder, how nicely clean and tidy this is, then I would say, well, I'm not satisfied with that. So what do? I take all these little leftover threads that I on purpose left there. I'm folding them towards the seam down. I fold this over the seam towards the back folded, which I always do. And now I'm just going to stitch in my little seam that I have from doing my armhole. And I stitch not only the threads left over, also the seam flat down. Make sure it doesn't show out on the top, rather push it a little bit farther down towards the seam. And now cut off the little bits of threads that might still hang from you doing this little seam, and then it is really nice and tidy again. If you look at it now, there's nothing showing up, nothing showing out. Perfect. And of course we do exactly the same on the other side. Also here your shoulder is perfectly, check that again. Here is your threads hanging over from your overlock. Twist them together, put them behind the seam the way you're going to fold it over, and just stitch it down. Make sure it doesn't show out on the top, rather push it a little bit down. Just a couple of stitches back and forth over. Cut off the leftover threads, and the top is finished as well then. All right, check it over again. Make sure that's how you like it, that's how you want it. You can never check enough, and that is how I like it. All right. So what is left to do is the seam on the bottom. While I was on the ironing board, I already had the dress on for one moment to see if this is the correct length that I want for my dress. And I ironed the bottom over 2 centimeters. And then now I will fold it over another 2.5. I could have ironed both parts over right away, and you can do that. And also here I look, where's my seam lying? I always want my seam lying towards the back, never towards the front. And also, if you have any other skirt or dress or whatever you do, you should always, in case if you want to stitch it over on the back, not on the front. That means always your seam is lying towards the back. So I prepared this, as I said, I ironed 2 centimeters over. The 2.5 I didn't iron. I'm just folding this over now, and I'm just gonna stitch along this now. Keep on measuring to make sure you do have a very even width of your seam down there, or put some pins in. Whatever is convenient for you, that's what you should do. But the best tip, as I always like to give, and most of you know that, I like to work with my patterns, because as this material is so stretchable, it helps me to really get a straight seam done. So take any of your patterns that you got lying around with a straight edge, and in the moment you have it lied over in that position, put your pattern on, let it run exactly against the needle, or better to say, let the needle run exactly against your pattern. Don't stitch into the pattern, because if it's a hard one, you have problems taking it out again. And do it as you can see, as I'm doing it, folding over about 10-15 centimeters. Put all of your material flat on the ground. Put the pattern against the needle and start stitching along it, along the side of it. So we're getting towards my seam again here from the other side. And there again, I looked already ahead in time. I want to fold it towards the back, because that's where it's supposed to be. And also here it helps that the material will not be pushed over when you get over this slightly thicker part where all the seams meet together. Always, again, lay it only the part you want to stitch, you have to lie in the proper position. How everything else is lying doesn't matter. Only look at a certain part. 10 centimeters is plenty. If you can do 15, it's all right as well. But you will see, only if you do it like this, step by step, bit by bit, you get the result of your sewing that you wish to have. And the more you do it like that and taking your time, the more professional in a certain way you will get to be. So there's only a little bit left to do. And again, on this video, I would like to say right away, I hope this is to any help to you. And this is video number 2. And the next one that I will prepare for you right now is to do the pattern for the bolero that I'm wearing together with this. The pattern, number 3, and then already comes the how to stitch the little bolero. But at the moment we're still at this. So now I will go to my ironing board and I'll stitch and I'll slightly steam this over. But as you can see already now, doing it with the pattern, sewing it, it's lying flat already anyway. It actually does not really need the ironing on top of that. It's totally finished. So check your sides. Is your pattern correctly there? Although that's a little bit too late if you haven't done it correctly with the cutting. But this dress is now the way I like it and the way you did see it when I'm wearing it. All right, again I say a special thank you for watching, and if you have any requests, let me know. I'm not promising for sure, but if I have the time and if I can do and fulfill your wishes, I don't mind doing it. So have fun with this second video and come around again. Bye bye for now.